It's August 26, 2020, and Hurricane Laura is 350 miles away from Gulf Shores in the NBC 15 area. I'm NBC 15 Chief Meteorologist Alan Sealls. It is a storm that will make landfall overnight as a powerful system, a Category 4 as I speak, but don't focus so much on that. Things you really need to start watching is all of these red boxes popping up. Those are tornado warnings in the far outer bands, and then focus on the center of the storm. It has multiple rings around it. I'll show you what that means in just a moment. Nonetheless, 145-mile-an-hour winds before sunset, about 120 miles off the coast of Louisiana, steadily moving northwestward at 15 miles an hour. It is a powerful system, but don't just focus on the category. It may fluctuate, and even if it drops from a Cat 4 to a Cat 2 before landfall, that storm surge is still going in. It will be high. That's what Katrina did, and even storms like Ivan did that also. It is possible it could go to Category 5, but those are all subtle issues because the big issue is how broad this system is and how many ways it's going to impact Louisiana and Texas. Here's a forecast to about 1 o'clock in the morning showing landfall somewhere right on the Texas-Louisiana border, but it's not just the center of the storm. It's especially the east side of it where you get a large impact, and it's those feeder bands that also take impact to the coastline. Moving through the night, it's likely to head northward right along the Sabine River after sunrise into central and northern Louisiana, the center, but still look at the bands to the east and even north of it where there's going to be heavy rain. Moving through tomorrow morning toward midday, heading toward Arkansas, only slowly losing strength, and even by the middle of the day, it's possible there could still be bands of rain producing flooding conditions and isolated tornadoes. So storm surge, that's the big issue tonight for all the coastal areas of Louisiana. As far east as, say, Gulfport, Mississippi, there could be storm surge of 2, 3, maybe 4 feet. But once you get from southeastern Louisiana toward the central part of the coastline, you're talking near 15 to 20 feet of storm surge, especially in the bays. Heading back toward Galveston, 6 to 10 feet along the upper Texas coast. And storm surge is a major killer. You cannot stop water. You've got to get out of the way. If you haven't done so already and you know you're in a storm surge or evacuation zone, you've got to do it. There's a hurricane warning. That area in red tells you where the winds are likely to be 75 miles an hour or greater. And remember, right around the center of that eye, as of afternoon, winds 140, 145 miles an hour. Outside of that hurricane warning, tropical storm warning that goes to just south of New Orleans, there winds may be 60 miles an hour, 50 miles an hour, still tropical storm force. The other issue, as I mentioned, tornado warnings, possible tornado threats for central Louisiana back to the east and west of the Sabine River, and then even into New Orleans. So those outer bands, even if you are a couple hundred miles away from the center of landfall, those outer bands can do a number on you. Don't underestimate how powerful and how widespread the impact could be. Rain overall could be up to a foot of rain in the next couple of days, especially right where it makes landfall, near Shreveport, somewhere along the Sabine River. And then notice that streak of red going into Arkansas. That could be 6 to 8 to 10 inches of rain. So flooding, tornadoes, storm surge, all of those are risks separate from the actual wind speed of the storm. Notice the projection at landfall, near landfall, winds maybe 150 miles an hour. Just beneath the threshold of being a Category 5. Again, it could be a Category 5, but when you look at that category scale, think of it as a runaway truck approaching you and the speed it's moving, 140, 130, 150, either way, you're going to get hit by a runaway truck, and that's the situation along the Louisiana coast. The storm will weaken going across the Ohio Valley, going into the Atlantic. Now, once it gets back to the Atlantic, it won't be a tropical storm, but it'll still be a storm. It could regenerate strength with winds going to, say, 45, 50 miles an hour. Not technically a tropical storm, but still a storm. So go back to earlier this week. Hurricane Marco had a bunch of lessons for us. It was a minimal hurricane, a Category 1, and the first lesson is hurricanes are not perfectly circular in the way they impact wherever they make landfall. For Marco, the heaviest rain, it was to the northeast. In fact, in the NBC 15 area, just to our east, basically 200 miles away from the center is where the heaviest rain was, and the tornado threats. South of it is where the feeder bands were. Those little skinny bands, those are those thunderstorms that feed into the storm carrying rain and isolated tornado threat. Fortunately for my area, those stayed offshore. On the northwest side, as tropical systems approach the northern Gulf Coast, a little dry air will come in, so you don't see a lot of clouds there. But north of the center and northeast of the center is where you had the storm surge for Louisiana. So the message there is storms are not perfectly circular. Here's the radar again as of late afternoon. We're seeing lightning, which tells you it's still a strong system to the north, and those bands, tornado warnings. And then notice the eye of the storm. If it doesn't stand out, there are actually several rings of heavy rain bands. Typically you focus on one, which is what we call the eye wall. And one of the things you're going to hear is something about concentric eye walls. And that raises the question, can a hurricane have two eyes? Well, the eye wall, it's that ring of strongest wind around the center of the eye. The bands of rain circulate in, the wind speeds up, and then centrifugal force will hold it away from the perfect center of the storm. But what we're seeing with Laura is two eye walls, not eyes. And it's going through what we call an eye wall replacement cycle, where the first wall will shrink in, fade away, the second one outside of it will gradually replace it. And when hurricanes go through these cycles, and they do it frequently, they fluctuate maybe one or two categories. And at the same time, they also fluctuate in how broad they could be. So these are things that we see as they approach the coastline, which is why you can't just focus on the category. Technology shows us some more stuff. Lightning, yes, hurricanes do have lightning, hurricanes and tropical storm, even though you may not notice when it moves over your community. But latest satellite shows in the last 24 hours from overnight to sunrise, a bunch of lightning throughout this storm, saying that simply it is a powerful system. Stay updated. Again, if you're in front of it, take action now. I'm NBC 15 Chief Meteorologist Alan Sealls.